You're Director General for Environment at the European Commission, and you are in a very good position to introduce the topic of our session of today about groundwater for adaptation, challenges and solutions. So, Mrs. Director General, the floor is yours. I think you want to come here at the mic.
Thank you very much. And indeed, groundwater is a very pertinent topic and very timely to have at this COP. Because if you look at the impacts of climate change on water cycles, they are becoming more and more visible and alarming. Now you will say, what can the European Union tell colleagues in the room who are probably even more affected than us on groundwater shortage? Well, nevertheless, I was asked to do and give the European perspective, and I can tell you it has changed. Since this summer, we have noticed that we can no longer take water for granted at all. It's a real paradigm shift for us. And perhaps it's good that now also in Europe, the fragility of groundwater, surface water, the rivers, the lakes, all of this has become very obvious. It is no longer taken for granted, but it also it's the quality and the quantity and the availability of water. And we had this summer, you know that perhaps, really a severe drought, and that made that for each and every citizen in Europe, out of a sudden, can I just ask, is it okay for you? Because I hear an echo. Is it okay for you? No, fine, okay. So we had such a drought that now each and every citizen in Europe out of a sudden understood there's an impact on health, there's an impact on food, there's an impact on energy security, because without water some of the installations would not work. And while we have this now focus, we don't know whether this focus means they will understand that we need to have transformative changes on the long run, because drought is not going away. Now, in the European Union, we have a framework which is very helpful, which is the Green Deal. And under this, of course, water is one of the big topics. But we have also, not only strategies, we have actually a very mature legislative framework for integrated water management. And this framework is really for floods and had been in place for a number of years, and has allowed us already to make adaptation possible, quite a lot. Oh, I think that's much better, thank you. But we also have a dedicated groundwater directive. Now, all this sounds good because these laws oblige member states, really oblige them to regulate the groundwater and to report back on it, and then to ensure that the extraction of the groundwater is regulated. And actually just now, just a month ago, we started to revise this groundwater directive and also consolidated the framework for surface water, rivers and other water bodies, because we realize in Europe we have a lot of pollutants coming into rivers, and they end up in the wastewater streams, and then therefore, you know, we cannot take then this water and reuse it just like that. We have to filter it, and because of the pollutants. And there are quite some serious pollutants like endocrine disruptors, forever chemicals. But we had also this summer one river that really reached tipping points because there was low water, warm temperature, and probably also some disclosure of certain pollutants and salt into the water along the river. And that reached tipping points, and we had a real ecological disaster. Are people now aware that this can happen everywhere? I'm not so sure, but we really have to look at it, and we have to now look at cooperation, because cooperation between states that share a water body means also early warning, adaptation. And that does also not necessarily always happen as well in Europe, but we're working on it, because shared management of transboundary waters is something that is very common in Europe. And we have to really make sure that through these cooperation mechanisms, people work together. Now, looking a little bit outside Europe, because that's what we also talk about here, is we know that the water availability plays very crucial role for peace, stability, and it's really having an impact, creating a backlog on the SDG 6 on water and sanitation. So when it comes to climate adaptation and also water, we really need good planning. Good planning means that we can become more resilient, that we start earlier, that we have also the means in order to start working together as managers for the water bodies, but also as decision makers in the affected regions to start building the adaptive capacity. And I think we have a possibility to bring water, not only here at this COP, and by the way, also this will be a big issue at the COP 15 for biodiversity, but bring it really up and up higher at the political level. And that will be at the occasion of the UN Water Summit next year. And here we have quite some ideas on how we should, get more political traction on water, because we think transboundary water cooperation is very much key. We have certain mechanism at it, but still very regional. And water will become really the next frontier. We will have issues on water. Where does the water go? And who gets the water? Upstream, downstream. So I think we have conflicts that might arise even more frequently. And I wouldn't exclude that we have really this distribution conflicts also in Europe. So we need to have to address the water ecosystem, food energy nexus much more effectively. If you don't have water, we don't have food, we don't have energy, we don't have other things. So this is a security issue. And I think we have to reduce the water footprint in our consumption and also in our production. And that is what we try to do a lot with the circular economy approaches and strengthen, indeed, as I said, the water governance. I think we also would plead for having a special envoy, a water envoy. Why? Because I think it puts it up much higher, and it would be a UN envoy special envoy for water would federate this need for a more political profile. All these actions, if you go in the next summit, would also help really groundwater. Now, let me turn to one area where also as European Union we are trying to assist other countries in finding for groundwater and water cooperation some cooperation levels. And we have quite a lot of examples to share, but one is, I think, very typical, because we have rivers like the Danube, the Rhine, you might have heard about it. It's big rivers, not as big as the Nile, but big rivers, and they are shared among member states. So we have to work in a transboundary way and cooperation. And that mechanism, we think, is conducive to talk, to prevent, to build resilience. And typically when we go outside and we spend money on adaptation, on groundwater and on cooperation on groundwater, we very often take the form of water facilitation dialogues to facilitate establishing transboundary water commissions or assisting in really setting up even institutional mechanisms. And we had one very not so recent, it was last year that we facilitated that. It was the Senegal Mauritanian Aquia Basin, and it covers 4 countries. And we were very happy that we could facilitate, also with some funding, that shared groundwater reserve, which is actually important for 80% of the population of some of these countries, that there was an agreement found in order to find a integrated water management. And I think these are examples we could also reproduce elsewhere. It's just, I wanted to give you an example of, we have drought, we act, we can do certain things, but we have to learn from you, because some of you have experienced drought longer, so you have solutions that we have to now take up. I think technology, innovation is a common concern for all of us. We have to use that more for water efficiency, water abstraction, and also for desalination. So lots of possibilities for cooperation are possible. But I think we also have to just bring it up actually much higher on the agenda. Difficult at current times because everybody thinks about, for instance, energy and other things. But we have now the possibility to build up this common understanding and this common work. And I would just encourage you to do so, because today we have the Water Day here, But we had in March, I think, we had the Global Water Day, and everybody was naming it the invisible resource. But actually, it is also a resource that is too much taken for granted because it's an irreplaceable resource, and it's a resource that we all need. So let's hope that today we have good discussions and fruitful ideas on how to cooperate. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Director General, for sharing your insights. And we know that you have other obligations, and we will see you later. Thank you very much for describing the current commitments of the European Union and the situation where groundwater resources are also key resources. Je vous propose d'écouter maintenant l'allocution de Monsieur le ministre Serigne Mbaye, ministre en charge de l'eau du Sénégal, pays très engagé dans le domaine de l'eau, comme ça a déjà été évoqué. Monsieur le ministre, je vous cède la parole pour votre présentation.
Merci beaucoup. Madame la ministre Barbara Pompili, chers panélistes, chers participants, je voudrais me réjouir de l'opportunité qui m'est offerte de prononcer un message à l'occasion de cette session officielle portant sur les eaux souterraines pour l'adaptation, les défis et les solutions. Session organisée dans le cadre de cette COP27 sur le climat. Comme vous le savez, l'année 2022 a été proclamée par la communauté mondiale de l'eau comme étant celle des eaux souterraines, sur le thème « Rendre visible l'invisible ». Le rapport de cette année, lancé à Dakar en marge du 9e Forum mondial de l'eau, nous invite à, je cite, « mettre à profit l'immense potentiel des eaux souterraines aujourd'hui et protéger cette ressource pour demain ». Fin de citation. En effet, jusqu'ici, l'eau souterraine reste un trésor invisible, méconnu, mais trésor pourtant stratégique pour l'alimentation en eau des populations, pour l'environnement et l'agriculture, parce que couvrant 40% des terres irriguées. L'Afrique a donc plus que besoin d'accorder une grande attention aux eaux souterraines afin de garantir la sécurité de l'eau pour les générations futures. Ainsi, la façon dont les eaux souterraines sont gérées peut être une réponse aux défis de la sécurité de l'eau. En effet, de l'avis de nombreux experts, l'eau souterraine pourrait être une solution pour la résilience dans ce contexte particulier de changement climatique. C'est la raison pour laquelle il est urgent que des études, aussi étendues que profondes, soient menées aux différentes échelles pour améliorer les connaissances, quantifier les volumes en vue d'assurer sa meilleure gestion. Au Sénégal, pour faire face à cette situation, le gouvernement a mis en place un plan d'action de gestion intégrée des ressources en eau depuis 2007. Ce plan a été actualisé avec les ODD pour aller à l'horizon 2030. Et ce plan met l'accent sur la gestion durable des ressources en eau avec un accent particulier sur les eaux souterraines. Dans ce contexte particulier marqué par des changements climatiques, des études de modélisation hydrogéologique de plusieurs aquifères ont été effectuées sur tout le territoire national du Sénégal pour soutenir l'approvisionnement en eau à travers des transferts d'eau, mais également pour servir d'outils en vue d'une gestion durable des aquifères. Ces études ont été possibles grâce à un réseau dense d'environ 500 piézomètres répartis sur différents aquifères avec un suivi régulier pendant plus de 50 ans. Ces données sont gérées dans une base de données dynamique d'une des directions du ministère, qui est la direction de la gestion et de la planification des ressources en eau. Et ces données servent d'outils pour la gestion des autorisations de forage et le suivi des prélèvements de la nappe. Actuellement, dans le cadre du projet sur la sécurité de l'eau, qui est un projet que nous lançons actuellement pour évaluer les usages et les disponibilités à l'horizon 2050. Donc, dans le cadre de ce projet, nous allons renforcer les initiatives de recharge des nappes souterraines et les périmètres de protection que nous considérons comme des actions d'adaptation pour gérer durablement nos eaux souterraines. Mesdames, Messieurs, il est important de souligner que l'eau souterraine est également partagée entre plusieurs États dans le monde. L'UNESCO a récemment cartographié 106 aquifères transfrontières en Afrique, représentant un potentiel de développement socio-économique pour la région. Ce qui fait de cette question un sujet d'une importance vitale pour le développement, car avec les changements climatiques et l'augmentation de la demande en eau, le partage des ressources des eaux souterraines sera au cœur d'enjeux entre acteurs, entre territoires, entre États. Je voudrais, dans ce cadre, me réjouir que le Sénégal, la Mauritanie, la Gambie et la Guinée-Bissau aient compris cet enjeu transfrontière de développement régional et aient pris la décision en septembre 2021 de joindre la gouvernance des eaux superficielles à celle des eaux souterraines à travers une déclaration ministérielle commune signée à Genève et portant sur le bassin aquifère sénégalo-mauritanien qui couvre les 4 États. Avec une superficie de 350 000 km², le bassin aquifère sénégalo-mauritanien est utilisé par environ 80% de la population de nos 4 États. Certes, la coopération dans le domaine des bassins hydrographiques existe à travers l'Organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Sénégal, qui regroupe le Mali, la Mauritanie, la Guinée et le Sénégal, et à travers l'Organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Gambie, qui regroupe la Gambie, la Guinée-Bissau et le Sénégal. Mais néanmoins, nous devons de plus en plus aussi nous orienter vers la coopération dans la gestion des aquifères transfrontières. Pour rappel, cette déclaration ministérielle est issue d'un dialogue qui a été entamé entre les 4 pays depuis février 2019. Ce dialogue a permis de mettre en place un cadre de coopération transfrontière autour de ces ressources hydriques souterraines partagées en étroite collaboration avec l'OMVG, l'OMVS, avec le soutien de Geneva Water Hub, du secrétariat de la Convention sur la protection et l'utilisation des cours d'eau transfrontières et des lacs internationaux, assuré par la Commission économique des Nations Unies pour l'Europe, ainsi que par le Centre international d'évaluation des ressources en eau souterraines. Plus tard, en 2021, l'Observatoire du Sahara et du Sahel a rejoint le groupe de travail régional dans le cadre de l'élaboration d'un nouveau projet. Pour terminer, je voudrais dire que cet exemple de coopération sur les ressources en eau souterraines devra inspirer les autres pays et régions du monde sur la nécessité de bâtir des stratégies et visions partagées en vue de poser les bases d'une gouvernance durable de cette ressource vitale pour l'adaptation et la résilience au changement climatique. Je vous remercie de votre écoute attentive.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci pour ces propos très éclairants sur l'exemple du Sénégal, à la fois très localisé en matière de politique nationale et également inscrit dans une logique de coopération transfrontière essentielle, que ce soit pour les eaux de surface ou les eaux souterraines. J'ai plaisir maintenant à céder la parole à Madame Barbara Pompili, présidente de l'initiative pour la gouvernance de l'eau, portée par l'OCDE, et ancienne ministre de la Transition écologique de France. Madame la ministre, selon l'usage en France, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, cher Eric. Et on m'a demandé de faire le discours en anglais, donc je vais le faire en anglais. Cher Monsieur le ministre Serigne, Mbaye, Thiam, chers panélistes, chers amis, when we think about water sources, we tend to picture lakes and rivers, the groundwater beneath our feet. And yet, around 90% of the world's readily available freshwater resources are stored in aquifers, which have a storing capacity 100 times larger than all the world's lakes. Groundwater does not just supply 40% of all irrigation water, it also provides drinking water to half the global population. Groundwater withdrawals grew tenfold in the past 50 years, enabling economies and populations across the world to prosper. In the United States, groundwater makes up half of all water used for irrigation, which has contributed to making US agriculture both productive and profitable. Here in Egypt, groundwater represents around 1/3 of Greater Cairo's drinking water supply. It is also a key source of water for some of the world's largest cities, such as Mexico City and Jakarta. But growing populations and climate change have magnified existing pressures on the quality and quantity of groundwater. OECD work shows that groundwater is being used faster than it can be replenished in many parts of the world, including Australia, Mexico, and the United States. Between 1960 and 2000, the rate of groundwater depletion more than doubled. This could become the biggest threat to agriculture and drinking water supplies in many parts of the world. The issue is that groundwater governance has generally not kept pace with these growing pressures. In most parts of the world, groundwater governance is generally lacking, not in Senegal, of course, when it is not completely absent. Groundwater has three important characteristics that make it hard to govern. First, it is invisible. And unfortunately, out of sight often means out of mind. This means that the impacts of overusing groundwater now might only become visible. Second, unlike river basins for surface water, groundwater cuts across administrative boundaries, which is often where decisions are made, data are collected, and stakeholders are engaged. And finally, groundwater involves a great deal of different users. So while it can be a great driver of economic development, it can also become a source of tension if it is not properly governed. So, what are the governance solutions for groundwater security in a changing climate? As the chair of the OECD Water Governance Initiative, allow me to highlight three fundamental aspects of groundwater governance following the OECD principles on water governance: data, cooperation, and policy coordination. First, we cannot improve what we cannot measure. And I am not just talking about data on the quality and quantity of groundwater. Data and information on institutional frameworks for groundwater are also scarce. To support the implementation of the OECD principle on water governance, the OECD Water Governance Initiative has developed water governance indicators that can contribute to monitoring and evaluating groundwater governance. Second, when there are no clear-cut boundaries for groundwater, cooperation is needed. Good groundwater governance should investigate if groundwater policies are tailored to place and tackle coordination challenges between the national, regional, basins, and local scales. Third, groundwater is not just about water. Groundwater both affects and is affected by different uses, such as agriculture, industries, and cities. For example, cities use groundwater in houses and businesses, but over-extracting the groundwater below them can cause land subsidence or sinking. This, in turn, affects the city's built environment. Good groundwater governance should address the interdependency between groundwater policies, surface water policies, and other related fields. That's why I'm very glad to hear what I heard when Mr. Minister spoke to Tara. Ladies and gentlemen, groundwater has been at the center of water discussions this year. Groundwater was the theme of World Water Day this year with the title, Making the Invisible Visible. Now, with this event in COP27, we are addressing groundwater as part of the climate conversation. Next month, the UN Water Summit on groundwater in Paris will draw attention to the challenges and opportunities groundwater offers across all sectors. The OECD Water Governance Initiative will be there to highlight the importance of good water governance toward more effective and efficient groundwater policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, so much, Mrs. President of the Water Governance Initiative, and we are all aware of the great work that has been done under the umbrella of the OECD for the past 10 years now. And now this is panel time, and I'm very happy to leave the floor to Mrs. Marie-Laure Vercambre, Director General of the French Water Partnership, and Marie-Laure will be moderating the panel. Marie-Laure.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here today. Yes, and this event also takes place after the conference that was organized on groundwater by the International Association of Hydrogeologists and UNESCO in May. And of course, ahead of the one that will take place and closing the year on this very important topic in December at UNESCO. And now we're going to have the pleasure to hear Miss Elodie Giuglaris from the French Geological Survey, the BRGM, and the French Hydrogeology Committee. She's joining us online. And so if we could please just a few more seconds, sorry. Maybe should we start with another panelist? Is that better? I start with another panelist? Okay. So apologies for this. Hopefully she will join us after that. I'm going to give the floor to Abdelkader Dodo. Abdelkader Dodo from the Water Department of the Sahel and Sahara Observatory, OSS, please. Mr. Dodo.
Oui, elle est là. Voilà.
Could you share with us the experience of your organization, the OSS, in transboundary groundwater management, please?
Good morning, but I think it's not me now.
Mike, please.
Allô, voilà. Mesdames, Messieurs, bonjour. Nous sommes ravis donc de participer à cet événement organisé par le PFE avec RIOP, donc nos partenaires de très longtemps, et aussi partager nos expériences, nos actions que nous menons justement dans le cadre des eaux souterraines, notamment les eaux transfrontalières. Alors, permettez-moi déjà d'introduire rapidement c'est quoi l'Observatoire du Sahara et du Sahel. C'est donc une organisation internationale qui est basée donc à Tunis et qui a une vocation africaine. Vous voyez, il y a pas mal de pays, il y en a 33, notamment 26 en Afrique. Et cette organisation sous-régionale, et on a un certain nombre aussi d'organisations non gouvernementales. Et nos services, pour la plupart, c'est vraiment d'être au service des pays, d'être une interface entre la science et comment donc transmettre l'information utile donc aux décideurs politiques. L'Afrique. Quand on parle de l'Afrique, il y a une grande disparité. Effectivement, en termes de précipitations, on a un grand désert, le Sahara, avec plus de 10 millions de kilomètres carrés. Donc, on a des précipitations de moins de 100 mm et des endroits, notamment dans le foutage allant au Cameroun, on a des quantités de l'ordre de 4000 mm donc, par an. La disponibilité en eau, donc c'est ça qui est aussi le grand enjeu pour nous. Il y a des régions qui ont une pénurie, notamment les pays d'Afrique du Nord. Il y a des régions qui sont en stress. Et il y a des pays qui sont aussi dans le confort, c'est qui sont en bleu, donc en bleu foncé. Et curieusement, si vous regardez la carte qui est donc en haut à droite, vous verrez que là où il y a la question de stress et de pénurie, c'est là où il y a le maximum d'exploitation. Presque 90% de la ressource est exploitée. Et les gens font même recours aux eaux non conventionnelles en essayant donc de dessaler les eaux de la mer ou bien de l'Atlantique, ou bien alors de la déminéralisation donc, des eaux qui sont très chargées dans le continent. En plus de cela, quand on prend aussi le continent africain, il y a un autre potentiel qui est là en termes d'utilisation, c'est le potentiel en terre irrigable. Donc si on essaie de comparer aussi un certain nombre donc, de régions, Afrique du Nord, de l'Est et de l'Ouest, vous voyez bien qu'en Afrique du Nord, on a quelque chose de l'ordre de 8 millions d'hectares qui sont déjà concernés comme potentiel. Mais vous voyez, ils exploitent 94-95% donc de ce potentiel. Alors qu'ailleurs, quand on regarde, ils ont aussi le potentiel. Afrique de l'Ouest, ils n'irriguent ou ne valorisent que la moitié. En Afrique de l'Est, encore moins. Et quand on regarde en dessous, vous voyez l'essentiel de la ressource qui est concernée pour justement ces activités-là, c'est ce qu'on appelle l'invisible, c'est-à-dire les eaux souterraines. Eh bien, qu'est-ce que savons-nous concernant justement ces ressources? En termes de mobilisation, si on compare aussi ces régions-là, parce que ce sont nos études de nous, OSS, dans ces régions-là, vous voyez bien qu'en Afrique du Nord, pratiquement 98% donc de la ressource renouvelable, 98% donc de la ressource, 93% disons, elle est prélevée pour un certain nombre d'activités, notamment les activités agricoles. En revanche, comme vous voyez en Afrique de l'Ouest, regardez ce potentiel, on n'exploite que 3%. En Afrique de l'Est, 15%. Pourtant, le potentiel, il est là. Alors la question, c'est de savoir, est-ce que ces pays-là, Afrique de l'Est, Afrique de l'Ouest, ils ont déjà couvert le taux de satisfaction en eau potable, ou bien il y a d'autres difficultés en termes d'accessibilité, en termes de disponibilité. Et c'est pour cela que justement dans ces régions-là, je suis désolé, c'est une question de compatibilité, c'est pour ça qu'il y a un décalage dans l'écriture là. Donc c'est pour cela que dans ces régions-là, notamment le continent africain, c'est que le ministre l'a dit, c'est la question des ressources en eau qui sont transfrontalières. Effectivement, ce continent, il a un potentiel extrêmement formidable. Si on prend toutes ressources confondues, c'est-à-dire renouvelables et réserves, c'est-à-dire non renouvelables, vous avez près de 83, 84, les chiffres, ça dépend de l'aquifère en tant que tel, en termes de caractéristiques. Vous avez plus de 6 000 milliards de mètres cubes de la ressource, 6 000 milliards de mètres cubes de la ressource pour les eaux souterraines, tandis que pour les eaux de surface, c'est quelque chose de 200 000 milliards de mètres, de 4 000 milliards de mètres cubes par an comme renouvelabilité. Et dans le tableau là que vous voyez, vous regardez aussi l'Afrique du Nord qui a un excellent potentiel. Donc l'Afrique du Nord, à elle seule, elle regorge plus de 50% de toute la ressource en eau sur le continent. En fait, il ne faut pas être surpris. C'est vrai, si on prend par exemple le fleuve Congo, il charrie plus de 41 000 m3 par seconde qui se jettent dans l'Atlantique. 41 000 m3 par seconde. Tout cela, pourtant nous nous plaignons de la question de la gestion de la ressource, la rareté de la ressource. Mais ici, si l'Afrique du Nord a un grand potentiel, c'est grâce à cet aquifère de Grès-Nubien, qui est le plus grand système aquifère dans cette région-là. Et c'est lui qui a près de 500 000 milliards de mètres cubes dans sa réserve. Alors, dans nos études, nous nous focalisons justement dans cette région-là, Afrique du Nord, de l'Ouest et du Centre, et nos études nous ont permis déjà d'avoir une bonne dizaine donc, de systèmes aquifères qui sont bien documentés. Là, vous avez les chiffres qui vous montrent donc, les réserves, donc peu renouvelables, mais qui sont vraiment utiles. Ces aquifères-là, c'est pour cela que dans notre continent, ce qu'il faut, c'est la gestion à la fois eau de surface, eau souterraine, transfrontalière, allez-y vers la conjoncture management. Alors, ces ressources-là, effectivement, on dit qu'elles sont invisibles. Alors, pour avoir ces chiffres-là, il faut bien les étudier. Pour les étudier, il faudrait bien passer par certains moyens, notamment donc, à travers les forages et autres, qui nous permettent donc d'accéder, de récupérer un certain nombre de données pour certains paramètres bien précis et avoir l'information qui nous permet de rendre justement cet invisible-là vers le visible. Poser, dupliquer, adapter cette approche-là à d'autres aquifères sur le continent. C'est le système aquifère du Sahara septentrional qui est partagé par l'Algérie, la Tunisie et la Libye. Là, vous avez deux grandes nappes superposées. Ça couvre à peu près 1 million de kilomètres carrés. Alors là, je vais vous montrer comment, justement, il est important d'avoir une historique de l'information. Vous allez voir une petite animation qui vous montre, regardez, comment les ouvrages sont réalisés depuis les années 50 à nos jours et les statistiques en termes de prélèvement, parce que c'est là l'information qui est capitale. Qu'est-ce qu'on prélève? Il y a beaucoup d'ouvrages qui n'ont pas de compteur. Et comment on peut se permettre de dire si on surexploite ou on sous-exploite cette ressource? Alors, grâce à ce modèle, on a développé un modèle, on a évoqué la question de modélisation. Ça nous a permis d'avoir la recharge. Cette ligne rouge que vous avez, c'est 1 milliard de mètres cubes par an en termes de recharge. Mais les histogrammes nous montrent qu'à partir de l'année 1985, les prélèvements ont dépassé la recharge. Ça veut dire quoi? On n'est plus à l'équilibre. Nous sommes en train de surexploiter notre ressource. Donc ce n'est pas étonnant si les pays d'Afrique du Nord évoluent vers les zones non conventionnelles par le dessalement depuis une bonne vingtaine d'années. Et c'est ce qu'on devrait normalement éviter parce qu'il faut toujours gérer à l'équilibre. Je vais continuer aussi à vous montrer la pertinence de suivre ces ressources-là parce que nous voulons inverser la tendance. Il faut faire en sorte qu'on ne puisse plus continuer à surexploiter parce qu'en ce moment-là, c'est une gestion minière. Alors là, vous avez une carte en 1960 qui vous montre la baisse du niveau d'eau. Vous avez les courbes. Et ces courbes-là, vous avez la Tunisie qui est sous forme de triangle. Et de part et d'autre, vous avez la Libye à droite et l'Algérie à gauche. Donc les courbes-là que vous avez, ça c'est la baisse des niveaux. Donc vous voyez bien comment la configuration en 1960. En 1980, 20 ans plus tard, vous voyez, on voit déjà une tentative d'interférence des baisses des niveaux entre les pays. 20 ans plus tard, en 2000, regardez comment ça se passe. Donc il y a un problème d'interférence. Interférence, ça veut dire un pays peut pomper plus et rabattre ou faire appel d'eau qui existe dans un autre pays. Donc nous sommes obligés, justement, en ce moment-là, de s'asseoir et de développer cette coopération entre les pays. Ça, c'est à l'heure actuelle, vous voyez à quel point donc, on a cette interférence-là. Alors, j'ai juste encore 2 slides, juste pour dire, par rapport à cela, quel message et quelle solution. On ne va jamais arrêter de répéter qu'il faut améliorer la connaissance. Ce n'est pas juste pour dire jamais l'autre pour améliorer, non. Sur les 80 ou les 100 systèmes qui fait transférer en Afrique, combien sont étudiés? Une dizaine seulement. Quand on parle du RIOG, Réseau international d'organismes de bassin, à l'échelle mondiale, vous avez un réseau à l'échelle de chaque continent. On a le réseau africain d'organismes de bassin. Mais sur les eaux souterraines, on a plus de 608 systèmes aquifères transfrontaliers étudiés dans le monde entier. On n'a que 7 qui ont un cadre de gestion. 7, dont 4 sur le continent africain. Donc on doit davantage encourager la mise en place d'un cadre de gestion de cet invisible pour le rendre visible. C'est pour cela que non seulement on va améliorer en quantité et en qualité, mais la gouvernance de la ressource doit concerner tous les acteurs, étatiques et non étatiques, mais renforcer cette coopération-là, comme je le disais. Il faudrait aussi renforcer les capacités et accroître la sensibilisation donc, des acteurs, développer des outils, des mécanismes de financement, parce que c'est fondamental, puisque nous sommes là pour dire que les océans sont là comme alternative pour accroître la résilience de la population, mais il faudrait aussi que la ressource financière arrive donc aux bénéficiaires, mais sous forme de dons, pas de prêts. Alors voilà, la dernière diapositive, c'est dire pour, voilà, nous l'OCS, voilà un certain nombre d'activités à travers des projets que nous développons, certains en cours, mais tout ça là dans l'objectif d'atteindre la cible donc 6, l'ODC 6.5, comme le ministre l'a si bien souligné. On a la journée mondiale de l'eau qui a évoqué cela. Mais surtout, donc, cette année, c'est l'année de la mise en valeur des eaux souterraines. Il faut les rendre visibles en temps alors qu'elles sont invisibles. Je vous remercie, madame, messieurs.
Bien. So we are going to have the pleasure to hear Elodie Giuglaris. Can you please put her on screen? Geoffrey? Yes? Here she is. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
Good morning.
After this focus on this North African region, which really poses questions, we're changing geography. We're going back to Europe. Elodie, you've worked on a very interesting case on the Upper Rhine transboundary aquifer. Could you please tell us more about the challenges this aquifer is facing with climate change and how transboundary groundwater management is preparing?
Thanks for the invitation to present our work. I have a little PPT maybe. I don't know if you have the possibility to do the projection.
Elodie, vous nous entendez? On passe à...
Apologies for this. We're having very big difficulties. So we're going to give the floor to the next speaker and go to India this time with Dr. Vaibhav Chaturvedi, fellow at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water in India, who is supported online by one of his colleagues, but we will not try this either. Mr. Chaturvedi, we know that groundwater plays a very, very important role in India. And could you please explain to us how you are engaging with the groundwater energy nexus, please? Thank you.
Very good afternoon to all. Thank you for inviting me for this very important session. So I come from India, and whenever you look at the water scarcity map of the world, there's one region that stands out, and that is India, because water scarcity in most parts of India is a challenge, and a lot of it is about groundwater. So just a bit about my organization. I work for the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, one of the leading climate-related think tanks based in New Delhi in India. We work across many different areas of work, but essentially think about quality of life, clean air, clean water, sustainable food, all those kinds of things, what kind of transformations we need to achieve a better sustainable quality of life, and also what are the enablers, like what are the finance technology enablers that we need to think about. So we also have many special initiatives, especially finance is a big issue that we kind of work on. Now, in terms of groundwater use across the world, India is the largest user of groundwater in the world, right? So it's 27% of global groundwater withdrawals happen in India. So it is definitely a big region in terms of the groundwater debate. In fact, if we just kind of map also the agriculture, and employment, agriculture, distribution of the land use map of India, very clearly we see that almost 70% of India's land use or employment generation happens in the agricultural sector. So agriculture is extremely important for Indian economy, even though it's the share of agriculture in India's gross domestic product is around 19% or so. But even then, the number of people who are dependent directly or indirectly in agriculture are almost 70%. So it's clearly one of the most important sectors, and Indian agriculture is not based on very sophisticated large farms the way you see in the Western the world. It's a very different kind of system. It is dominated by millions of marginals and small farmers, and when you have that kind of system, very small farm sizes, the kind of capital investment that happens in agriculture is very limited also. And that's why if you look at the water regime, water is absolutely critical, and most of India's agriculture is dependent on rainfall, so very important. And groundwater is extremely important for most of the farmers, almost all of the farmers in India, and that's why groundwater becomes such an important part of the debate. And if you look at India's groundwater withdrawals, 87% of the groundwater withdrawals in India happen for agriculture. So clearly, it is an extremely important resource for agriculture in India. And in fact, if you could see the numbers, 71 million hectares is under net irrigation in India, and 64 of it is by wells and tube wells. Essentially, groundwater irrigates most of India's agriculture, right? So it becomes a very important resource. And the very interesting, what I want to emphasize in today's presentation is this very interesting nexus between electricity and groundwater usage. So if you look at this, the map of India, it clearly shows that all the red dots is where we know water is overexploited. So much more water withdrawal, groundwater is happening as compared to the the recharge that is happening. So over extraction is happening. But what we show on the right side, which is the kind of, it shows the losses of electricity distribution companies. And that's very interesting. Why are we talking about, in a discussion on groundwater, why are we talking about India's electricity distribution companies? It's a completely different sector. And that's where the whole energy water nexus comes to the fore. So if you look at the water pricing regime in India, there is no marginal pricing of water. And that's very important. There is no marginal pricing of water. So the way it happens is, when a farmer gets a tube well or a well, depending on the wattage of the pump, of the electricity pump, let's say it's a 5 kilowatt pump, then the government or the state government charges a fixed amount. So if it is a 5 wattage pump, the amount is whatever, let's say $100 per year. If it is a 10 wattage pump, the amount might be $200, but there is a fixed amount that the state governments charge to the farmers. And beyond that, the fixed amount could be low, could be high. It doesn't matter, because after you have paid that fixed amount, then there is zero price on water. Right? You could withdraw as much water as possible. Right? So that's why marginal pricing of water is something is missing in the Indian ecosystem, and there are very important reasons for it. Because if we are talking about millions of marginal and small farmers, for introducing marginal pricing of water, you need to measure water. We need to measure how much each farmer is consuming. So basically, metering of agriculture water supply and consumption is very important. And that requires, we are talking about a very extensive infrastructure for the same. Very, very extensive infrastructure. And that is a kind of a challenge in the sort of Indian ecosystem. And low recovery of electricity charges from the agricultural sector lead to a lot of losses on the distribution company side. So you could see in India, it is the DISCOM's commercial losses are expected to be almost $5 billion every year. So India, as you would have known in the larger energy debate, the distribution sector of India, electricity distribution sector of India, is known to be its Achilles heel. So it is a very important sector, but that is also where the biggest challenges lie. And annual losses are to the order of $5 billion. And of the $5 billion, the estimates are anywhere between $2 to $6 billion are coming because of agriculture sector losses. So there are two separate estimates, but the broader point is the subsidy of agriculture pricing leads to losses on the electricity system, which is very important from the perspective of pushing renewable energy in the larger grid. But also on the perspective of groundwater management, it leads to heavy abstraction of groundwater because there is zero marginal price on groundwater. And there are many regulatory interventions for groundwater use. So the government recognizes that this is a big challenge. So that's why every state has its own kind of regulation. But it's not that all the states have a strong regulation. We have got something like a model groundwater bill, which was first proposed in 1970, that has been amended, has been improved. But there are only few states that actually follow and have got this governance structure, for really set up in terms of managing the groundwater resources, but also the electricity water nexus that we're talking about, because agriculture is a hugely political issue. If you talk about the number of farmers that engage in agriculture in India, it's a very large, voter base. So the political economy of, doing any kind of big reform or big change in the system of agriculture, it's a very difficult bullet to bite for any government that comes in. And that is what it makes it very, very challenging to manage groundwater in India. There are some technical interventions also. Now, these are some of the latest ones. Something which is very famously called in India, per drop more crop through micro irrigation. Essentially, while managing the groundwater in itself is going to be very challenging, by investing in micro irrigation can do is at least enhance the water use efficiency of water, which will lead to, of course, lesser pressure on groundwater. Then also metering of electricity connection. As I said, the moment we start, we are able to meter water consumption. It gives us a good sense, and then you could you could do things like marginal pricing, and you could do a lot of follow-up. So metering of groundwater connections and in wells is going to be very important. Finally, there is a very famous flagship scheme called the Kusum scheme. Essentially, the scheme is about pushing solar irrigation. So the growth in solar irrigation pumps, the target is 1.75 million solar irrigation pumps. So it's a very ambitious target that the government of India is pushing, and in fact there is also essentially the government is giving a lot of capital subsidy to introduce solar water pumps in a very big way. It's also growing at a very fast pace now. So this is something, the area to watch out for. But another interesting perspective is, once you install a solar pump, then it actually takes away any incentive to conserve water. So there is zero price on water once you have installed the solar pump. So what the government is also doing is trying to couple solar pumps with other interventions, like is the farmer able to sell electricity to the grid? So other interventions that somehow incentivize farmers to not use water just in abstracted without limits. So there is some limits that are going to be things. So way forward is, well, there's some regulations that are adopted by states. Water rights need to be defined. Irrigation, electricity, water nexus is absolutely important, and government is already thinking about, because solar pumps are coming in a very, very big way. And ultimately, welfare benefits of solar pumps and the trade-offs need to be kind of better understood. We are engaging as an institution with different state governments to think about this issue at the state level, and in their energy policy in terms of integrated state water plan. From the food system perspective, water becomes very important, agriculture, water. So we are also looking at this issue through many state governments in a much more deeper way, to ensure that the pressure on groundwater is much lesser in the future, and it's a much more sustainable management of groundwater resources for India. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for these very insightful examples. We're now going to South America, and we're going to welcome Mayná Coutinho Morais, General Director of the Committee for Gandu Water Reserve in Rio de Janeiro. Mayná, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to reinforce the importance of having this panel, to discuss the importance of groundwater reserves to face the consequences of extreme events due to climate changes. But most of all, we have to point out that no solution, no isolated solution will be the perfect solution. We must have an holistic approach so that we can face climate changes. Well, I'll show you some things that we do in CEDAE to face those consequences. We know have water shortage. In our case, we have experienced water shortage due to the climate changes. Well, let me just adjust. Well, CEDAE actually uses groundwater researches when the surface water is not available. We can't use the surface water system, and when, of course, the geological conditions allow us to have this kind of approach. Another case that we have been using is to complement the surface water system so that we can supply, have an adequate amount of water supply for our population. So in these cases, we have been combining the surface water system with the groundwater. Nowadays, we operate 19 wells to supply water quality, water quantity. And most of them generally has, the water has excellent quality characteristics. So we use filtration, and sometimes we use as well pre-treatment as a form of treatment. We know that climate change scenario brings us challenges due to those extreme events. And as I said before, one of these consequences for us is a water shortage. That forces us to use the groundwater resources. We use from 100 to 250 meters deep. And sometimes those wells, we don't have the presence of saline intrusion, but a curious thing that I would like to share with you is that sometimes we can notice during the water monitoring a presence of chloride, but not due to saline intrusion, but due to natural consistent of the rocks, of stones, that ends up releasing this material in the water. Well, as I said before, we must have holistic approaches to face these challenges. And in this matter, we are very proud to be a team that has sustainability in our DNA. And due to the stronger guidelines that are brought to us by our CEO, We are now an ESG fully committed company, okay? CEDAE has several actions that together, we have several actions that together, that integrated, we can face climate changes. We are now building a legacy of sustainability for the state of Rio de Janeiro, because we have actions to protect water research, energy efficiency, restoration of forests, and decreasing gas emissions. Well, water safety is very strategic for us because CEDAE is responsible for and this water plant is responsible for supplying 90 million people in Rio de Janeiro. So we must have actions that together can guarantee for us water quantity and water quality. We have had very positive results due to these coordinated actions. And recently, this one is important. Recently, we have acquired 80 floaters, LG Sonic, which use ultrasonic waves in the water so we can avoid and control kelp growth. It's very important for water quality because we are talking about the strategic river basin, Guandu. So they are 80 high-tech floaters to avoid and control the kelp growth, but also in addition to do real-time monitoring for us. It has been essential to improve water quality because we can take quick actions when we notice any change or any instability on water quality. So we can get this data in real time and get quick actions so that we can mitigate it and in a way that doesn't affect our population. Well, as I said before, we had several plans regarding to water safety. We have acquired 2 river water treatment structures in Poços and Queimados rivers. They have been essential to guarantee water safety regarding to quality. We have also an energy efficient plan so that we can save 40% of energy consumed using photovoltaic panels. Well, we have a program that makes us very proud. Just finishing. We have a program that makes us very proud. We call it Replantando Vida, replanting life in English. This project is very important to us because through this project we can restore Atlantic forests by by the rehabilitation of prisoners through employment with sustainability. So we have 7 forest nurseries in the state of Rio de Janeiro through this program. It's a program that restore forests and restore lives. We have an annual production capacity of 1,800,000 Atlantic forest native seedlings, and among them we have 14 endangered species. Just to wrap up, recently we have developed a program in which we are going to restore 1 million seedlings in an horizon of 5 years in the riparian area in Guandu River. And also we have tons of actions regarding to the modernization of Guandu, Lameirão and Laranjal, which are very important also to our population. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully we're going back to Europe and we're going to hear Elodie, who is going to talk about the Rhine, the Upper Rhine transboundary aquifer. So let's bear with us and let's give it another try. It's a very interesting example.
I hope it will work.
Elodie, I will ask you to be short, unfortunately, to be like 5 minutes long.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I don't have the button to do the share with the PPT. Maybe I can begin, and if you can after give the PPT.
Please begin.
Okay. So here I would like to underline the essential role of this groundwater in the context of climate change adaptation. For that, I will use, like you said, the Upper Rhine aquifer as example, on which we are working since 50 years in cooperation with our German colleague, who are sharing the same resource and therefore the same challenge. In fact, this aquifer is one of the most important resources of drinking groundwater. Yes, I can share now. Sorry. Yeah. You see the PPT?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So this aquifer is one of the most important resources of drinking groundwater in Western Europe, with an estimated volume exceeding 60 billion of cubic meters. But maybe more important, it's a resource very easy to use due to the presence of water at very shallow depths and with a very good ratio of recharge. Due to this situation, 80% of the water consumption in the area is from groundwater, and the most important cities are supplied by 100 of groundwater for drinkable water. Due to the importance of the resource, a monitoring of the quality and quantity was put in place in already the 1920s. So we have now 100 years water level records. The main concern was in the past quality due to human activities impact. Industrial, but also a lot of intensive agriculture. And basically, the lack of water was not identified as a real challenge. As I showed you, this is no longer the case. The proximity of groundwater leads also to the presence of particular ecosystem and related biodiversity such as wetland and forestry. And there is also a very strong relationship between rivers and groundwater with high exchanges. These links allowed maintaining a good flow rate in river stream and where there is a rainfall deficit such as this year. In the last 5 years, the agricultural sectors have switched to groundwater to deal with the increase in repetition of drugs due to climate change. And we face a clear increase in irrigation demands to maintain the same farming practices. And in the same time, we observe in summer a dryness of rivers and sources, which never have been dry in the memory of people in the center part of the river plain. First, we thought that was due to an overpumping at the proximity of the river. Like you can see, we have a lot of borehole very close of the river. In order to manage this pumping, a water agency and regional public governance asked to give more details. So we had some additional hydrogeological investigation leading to challenging observed piezometric levels shown in the two figures. And in fact, we discovered it was more general issues. It's a general drawdown of all the groundwater in the area, who basically cuts the alimentation of the rivers. And with other analysis, we could also say that the general breakdown is due and only due to irrigation in summer. The observation of the drying up of the river was the first indicator because groundwater is invisible. We have a clear warning that we are overpumping in this area. Finally, on this specific area, the impact of climate change is not direct on groundwater resources. It's only due to an increase in pumping, and we face a clear conflict between ecosystem needs and agriculture sector's demands. Here, on the first chart, you can see the decrease in summer in the limit where there is an impact on rivers. But on another area, closer to the mountain, Vosges, we also observe an increase of the drying up of river. And there, the trend of groundwater level is different and shows a decline year by year, like you can see on the second chart. Here, our hypothesis is a double effect, which leads to a negative water balance. Overexploitation, but also a decrease on the recharge of groundwater. In the first simulation of the evolution that we did in this part of area, in fact, the scenario of climate change, we can also say, in fact, that this trend will continue. Maybe another important point. In fact, we need to understand locally what happened to propose the most appropriate solution. We have in France the luck to have already, in fact, an integrated approach by basin, but now this model is questioned by the new challenges and therefore we need to optimize our answer. It means primarily a need of research on the different processes involved in the recharge, transport of groundwater, transfer, but it means also a need for accurate data, robust and reliable monitoring of groundwater evolution. And maybe the most challenging, the evolution of our own tool to do prevision. To summarize, groundwaters appear like sometimes a solution to face lack of surface water resources. Reading on these groundwater resources, key elements are to really understand the local behavior of groundwater as a key part of the water cycle. But what is really usable? What can be really restored without an impact on ecosystem? And just to finish, to have a little look, we just pick a little of transboundary cooperation on this aquifer. In fact, we have different level of cooperation. A political level with the conference of the Upper Rhine, and then a scientific collaboration with the network LOGAR. In this network, we share together practice and development we have in both countries. And at this time, we share the same observation and we are building together new projects to be able to have the appropriate tools to answer to the current challenge of the prevision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear from Jehanne Fabre from Danone. Jehanne, could you please share with us your perspective and of course being very mindful of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very pleased to be with you today and to represent the private sector voice here. I will try to be very short. I guess I have a minute. I think the main essential message is to say that the private sector has a role to play and responsibilities to take when it comes to preservations and restorations of groundwater. We all know that the UN 2023 conference is coming next year. We have an opportunity to work further together, private sectors and public sectors. During these sessions today, we have heard a lot about collaborations. We know it's essential, but we don't know how to do it. So here it's going to be a call for governments and different actors in the room. We are building currently a coalitions of different actors representing all the sectors to work together in defining the how of collective actions to preserve and restore to groundwater. We need to accelerate work on the ground, so there is no time to waste. So if there is anyone interested, you can contact me, MGN. I'm working for Danone. And thank you for the opportunity for delivering this very short message.
Thank you very much, Jehanne. Thank you again to Elodie. Thank you for your patience. I will now give the floor to Eric Tardieu for a few concluding words. Thank you.
Merci Marie-Laure. Et comme je suis aussi concerné par la session qui suit, je vais effectivement m'astreindre à une conclusion extrêmement rapide en 5 points majeurs. Nous avons confirmé au cours de cette session évidemment que le changement climatique est une pression nouvelle, croissante, qui se combine à des pressions existantes sur les eaux souterraines, telles que l'approvisionnement en eau potable, bien entendu, mais aussi l'agriculture, l'irrigation, et qu'il y a un enjeu majeur de sécurité de l'eau et de résilience à regarder très près notre gestion de ces ressources en eau souterraine. Malgré la priorité de cette année sur Make the Invisible Visible, il faut reconnaître que la gestion des eaux souterraines est globalement sous-représentée dans l'allocation de nos ressources scientifiques, politiques, et qu'il y a un enjeu là aussi à renforcer l'attention collective sur ces sujets, y compris en matière d'adaptation. Troisième message, il y a un besoin important de connaissances complémentaires, de sciences complémentaires sur les systèmes d'eau souterraine. Nous avons besoin de nouveaux modèles à différentes échelles qui tiennent compte de la complexité des systèmes d'aquifères. Nous avons besoin de davantage de données, de systèmes d'information, d'infrastructures de suivi, de systèmes d'alerte précoce, bref, de systèmes d'information sur les ressources en eau souterraine qui permettent de mettre en place des solutions telles que la recharge des aquifères, les transferts éventuellement, et en tout cas une meilleure gestion de ces eaux souterraines. Mais nous avons besoin non seulement de davantage de science, mais aussi de davantage de gouvernance. Et nous savons bien que la gouvernance des eaux souterraines doit être renforcée dans de nombreux cas. L'allocation de ces ressources en eau, le suivi plus précis, la régulation des prélèvements dans ces ressources, le besoin de mécanismes permanents, institutionnalisés, de coopération, de prise de décision, de gestion collective de ces ressources pour mieux les et aussi pour éviter les conflits. Dernier message, bien entendu, au titre du réseau international des organismes de bassin, nous soutenons fortement cette idée qu'il faut aussi doter les eaux souterraines d'organismes de bassin dédiés en utilisant les organismes de bassin d'eau de surface existants ou en créant de nouveaux, et nous avons eu quelques exemples. Et en tout cas, il est essentiel que des mécanismes de gestion durables puissent eux aussi s'appliquer sur ces eaux souterraines. Et je conclurai en indiquant que c'est le sens aussi du plan d'action de Dakar sur les bassins, des rivières, des lacs et des aquifères. Donc la préoccupation porte bien sur l'ensemble de ces ressources. Merci une dernière fois à nos éminents panélistes, merci à nos interprètes et merci à vous tous pour cette grande session. Je te retourne la parole pour le dernier mot, peut-être Marie-Laure.
Vous remercions tous.